Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my video continuing my series of ranking all the Rangers of each color inspired by the recent anniversary special Power Rangers Once and Always and the general Power Rangers anniversary. All the ones up to this point was recorded before Once and Always. They came out sort of before and then after it. This one is for sure coming out after since it's being recorded like at least over a week since it came out. So this one is going to be for Green Rangers. I've been covering all the primary like main Ranger colors. This one obviously is a color usually used for the main team but also is spread into 6 Rangers. And then I'm going to dip into other colors after this, and 6 Rangers, I think, and extra Rangers type of stuff will be the finale of like this particular line. There'll be plenty other rankings throughout the year. But that's enough preamble. Let's go ahead and get started with some honorable mentions. So for an honorable mention, I'm putting Adam. If you watch my previous list, you know that he made it high into my Black Rangers list, and that's why he's an honorable mention here, because he is a favorite Ranger of all time, but I wanted to give some love to some other Rangers, so having Adam be on the same list, you know, for Green and Black would be repetitive, and, you know, it gives a chance to talk about other characters. Also, Damon as an honorable mention. I don't know why, I always just liked him. I just found him to have a likable personality. I've always dug that Green Ranger suit. I don't know why. It's kind of like I just can't explain it. It just clicked with me. I liked the helmet. I thought it was neat looking. And I just liked Damon's energy. Specifically, like I always remember his energy in the first battle where he was like just excited to be a Ranger and he's like, the power! It was, I don't know, it was just fun. But now getting into the top 5 actual numberings. Number 5 is the Sky Cowboy Joel. Now, I'm not the biggest Lightspeed fan, it's lower on my list, it's not an overall favorite, but I absolutely adore Joel. He's the most fun character to watch in this series. He's a character that easily just could have felt like a bit, and in a way it is, but I feel they do enough with his character to endear you to him as an actual human being, with his romance with Miss Fairweather and more humanizing moments. And the idea of this sort of celebrity pilot ranger is a lot of fun, because he's being chosen for his skills, obviously, as a pilot, and, you know, that translates to piloting the Zord and whatnot, but he also has this celebrity aspect, which is kind of fun and unique for a Ranger, and it plays into him being just such a memorable and fun character, and I've always loved his character, like all throughout my history of Lightspeed being kind of a more mid-range series to me, he's always still remained one of my favorites. Number 4 is Bridge from SPD. Like, what's not to like about Buttery? And then in Once a Ranger, when he's talking to Spencer and the Butterists, that's my favorite one. He's just such a fun character. You know, the whole SPD cast is filled with great characters, but Bridge obviously is a standout for a lot of reasons. I think that, like, you know, there is a sort of archetype for some Rangers, you know, some Green Rangers, some yellow, some blue, kind of like Dax or Chip or whatever, like this character Ziggy to be the kind of quirky character, and Bridge definitely fits that, but he's also unique in terms of being a quirky character. Like, honestly, I can't think of a character that's necessarily similar to him. Like, yes, he's a quirky character, but it's not like one of those characters where it's like, oh, he's a quirky character like this one and he's got that same mold. He's a quirky character, but I've said the word quirky too much in this, but he said, my point is, use the word one more time. He's a quirky character, but he does it in a unique way. He doesn't make a buffoon out of himself. He's almost very eccentric, so there's moments where you think like, oh, he's being stupid, but he's not. He's just different because he's thinking of things in a different way. And I like the way they played into that with his unique sort of ESP ability and made him for a fun character to watch that definitely stood out amongst the more unique Ranger type characters. Not to mention, this doesn't really have anything to do with him being a Green Ranger, obviously, but I do find it so interesting him becoming a Blue Ranger and then a Red Ranger. You know, again, this is about him as a Red Ranger, but he makes for a very unique Red Ranger. This was obviously done because behind the scenes they couldn't get Jack back, or I think it was because he was like dating Kira's actress or something, or whatever. But I think that created a unique situation. That's why I'm still hoping that they do that SPD like one-shot where, you know, from this picture we have, because I would love to dig into seeing what Bridge is like as a Red Ranger, especially with backstory that like his fiancée Sophie the robot died and now he wears her as the fire armor. Anyway, this isn't about Red Rangers. The point is, I like Bridge. Number 3, speaking of quirky characters, Ziggy. I love Ziggy. He is so much fun to watch. You know, I mentioned in Dylan's discussion in the top Black Rangers how my favorite dynamic in that series was between him and Ziggy, Dylan and Ziggy. Such a classic sort of odd couple pairing. And Ziggy was just such a funny character, one of the funniest characters in the series. And I like that he had kind of a shady backstory. It was kind of like a watered-down version of he effectively used to work for the mob, which is crazy. But I like that he is a unique character in that sense, that he comes from this sort of shady background, kind of like the shady, wisecracking character that's not a bad guy, he's got a heart of gold, but he's found himself in some hard times, and, you know, gets a chance to shine as a hero. And they, you know, that's kind of as seedy as a Power Rangers backstory can get. They watered it down a little bit, obviously, from what they were allowed to do, but I find that always to be unique, and I almost forget about that aspect of the character a lot. Something else I also really like about his character, or just the way it happened, was that he accidentally became a Ranger. I think that was really cool. Like, it just makes for kind of this unique situation where it explains why he's kind of a less experienced Ranger and gives you an excuse to see his development over the course of the series. But yeah, I just really like Ziggy. Just such a fun character, one of the bright spots of a series that's already filled with a lot of all-time favorites. Honestly, a lot of the RPM Rangers made it into these rankings. And then Tommy for number two. Number two. This is interesting too. This came up in my Black Rangers list, but it's interesting ranking these because a lot of the time you're ranking the Rangers based off of their role in the main team, and you're comparing and contrasting their role within the core team unit, within like previous Black Rangers, what those characters are like, previous Green Rangers, what that's like, previous Pink Rangers. But then you have certain ones like Black Rangers, where most of them are part of the core team, but then you have Tommy as this mentor ranger. And then you have this list where the lion's share is members of the main team, a lot of them more quirky, funny characters, but then it started with a sixth ranger that was an evil ranger, who is difficult to rank when you're comparing quirky characters like, man, the word of the day is quirky, but characters like that, like Ziggy and Bridge, to Green Ranger Tommy. But Tommy is one of the coolest Green Rangers for multiple reasons. I mean, I always joke about he was kind of pathetic when he turned good. Not because he turned good, but because it always became about like, oh my god, Tommy sprained an ankle, we gotta get to him. And it was always like, the Green Ranger is such an asset. I'm like, is he though? I feel like you're always looking after him. But you have to look at the heroic aspects of that in the terms of he wanted to use those powers as long as possible to do as much good as possible until they ran out, which, on a story level is good. But also, of course, you have the evil Green Ranger, which JDF shined, I think, probably most as evil Green Ranger, but I think that his two best roles were like on the opposite end of the spectrum, where you have evil Green Ranger performance and then mentor Tommy, where he was able to show both. And he really did excel as a Green Ranger and one of the most iconic evil Ranger storylines. So he deserved a place on this list for being unique in the sense that he is this badass evil Green Ranger, but then the heroic Green Ranger that ultimately redeemed the powers for good. Number one, though, might be an unconventional choice because it's not exactly the most deep character or deep reasons or, a huge laundry list of reasons why, like for Tommy, like, oh, all these different points why he's on the list. But number one is Xander. Plan Xander. Need I say more? Number one is Plan Xander. I really honestly struggled with this in a way. I was trying to think of the rankings and I'm like, well, I don't have as many in-depth reasons why Xander's on here. Like Tommy's got more character reasons and different roles he's played as the Green Ranger, and then Ziggy's got more character reasons, but I'm like, you know what? I just like Xander the most, and that's the whole point of this list. For the most part, he doesn't get a lot of development. There was that kind of nice bit, I can't remember if it was Madison or Vita. I think it was Madison, but he was talking about how he fit in with the group because he initially kind of was, teased for having his accent and being different. And they kind of had that moment of vulnerability and explaining why he was, brought into that friend group. And there was a couple little moments like that. But for the most part, Xander was just a fun and charming character to watch. I just always found him to be a joy. And I loved Plan Xander. I always found that to be so funny, the idea of like, Plan Xander, let's just talk this out. Like, even if it was like, it didn't make a lot of sense, that almost made it funnier. Like, when you're coming to the table with like a normal, which Power Rangers doesn't have a lot of normal villains that aren't just mindless monsters to be exploded, but that's funny in and of itself, just the idea of let's try to talk this out with a charming plan. But when it would be with like truly mindless monsters, it was funny. Like, I always remember it most in Once a Ranger when he goes up to the Chillos and he's like, time for Plan Xander, let's just talk this out. It's so ridiculous, but it's funny. That's like going to the putty showing up at the park, and all of a sudden like, let's just talk this out, Plan Xander. But yeah, I just love Xander. I don't have necessarily huge, deep reasons, but he's always been one of my all-time favorites, obviously. But that is just my list. As I always say with this list, this isn't the true list or the correct list. I didn't run an algorithm. It's just my personal list, and I want you to share your personal list of favorite Green Rangers in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications from my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.